What's going on, Mongs? It's me, SemI-Mong. Today we're back on Crowfall, and the latest patch has hit. Okay, so it's now patch 5.8.1, bringing with it some new things and fixing a few bugs. But today I want to spend 5 minutes discussing something that I've only just sort of clocked onto that came within patch 5.8. No, it came within patch 5.8. Now we're a whole patch later, and I've only just sort of noticed it and sort of started to think about it myself. But before we get into that, with this new patch, they have brought in week-long campaigns. As you can see, there's only 2 days left on this one. They fixed the UI. It is currently season of full, so that is the correct time and the correct amount of time remaining. So for the remaining of this server, I'm going to just gather, try and get myself a few bits of ore stacked and a few bits of leather so I can just rush through the starting area in the next sort of campaign world, and then just get a few bits of ore stacked so I can actually just jump straight to rune tools and advanced weapons rather than having to get myself some intermediate ones and then go out and gather the resources like I am now. Just sort of boost myself ahead. As you can see, I'm currently level 5, so I'm getting myself there. I've only been logged on for a couple of hours. I've had a hectic week. But yeah, with that being said, with patch 5.8, they introduced the talent system and removed the class and race skill trees from the passive skill training. And with this game change, the introduction of the talent system and the removal of the skill trees and the passive training, comes a sort of a change to the crafting and gathering aspect of how you play Crowfall. Now, it's not that much of a major one, but I thought it'd just be fun to discuss while I work on my Gwynny and level them up to level 16, try and get those 2 major discipline slots and start focusing on a bit of PvP. Of course, as the now servers are weekly, hopefully I can get back into a better routine and try and get a bit more of consistent content out for you guys. But pre 5.8, they had class and race skill training in the passive skill system, and within these skill trees, you had nodes dedicated towards certain gathering and crafting professions. For example, my Gwynny guy here would have nodes for woodworking and woodcutting, and then mining and blacksmithing and jewel crafting as well. And I picked him because he had nodes towards blacksmithing that I could use for the weapons, and mining that I could use towards my rune tools. And then I combined that with the racial ability that he had to go stealth to sort of compose the perfect solo polo player. Of course, I have no one to play with. He was able to go stealth so I could sneak around, and then within the passive skill training system, he had nodes towards the professions that I like to work on. Of course, blacksmithing and rune making, or the rune tools. But now with the introduction of the talent system, and of course the removal of the passive skill training, the class and racial nodes, you no longer are sort of restricted in a sense to play a certain race or a certain class if you wanted to focus a certain profession, but you can no longer have those statistic increases. Now, each class still does have certain statistic increases towards 2 professions, I believe. It may be more, I'm not quite sure. Now, as I said before, the Gwynny had woodworking, jewel crafting, and then mining and blacksmithing. Now, the Gwynny, as you can see, still has jewel crafting and woodworking statistic increases. They've just gotten rid of the mining and the blacksmithing that you would have gotten pre 5.8 from the passive skill training, the class and the racial nodes. Now, I'm going to have to go from class to class to see what classes have what profession increases, but it seems they've gotten rid of a few of them and added 2. It'd be nice to be able to see what professions they focus in the character creation, but yeah, that would be something for the future. Now, the the biggest effect of this is, of course, the harvesting nodes that you used to get from the passive skill training. Pre 5.8, you would sort of pick a class, or you potentially would have 2 classes, one for combat, one for gathering and crafting, and pick the best class towards the professions that you would want to work on. Now, of course, racial abilities such as the Gwynny and Stealth, or the Elk's Trailblazer, which is increased movement speed, would of course also be a factor. But generally, you would pick a class that had skill nodes towards the professions that you wanted. Now, with the removal of this and the talent system not including any gathering or crafting skill nodes, it's just for combat, you're no longer restricted by class choice. It's more free-for-all, it's less restrictive. You don't have to pick a class depending on what professions they have. Now, of course, you still get the extra 2 statistic increases from the racials pressure to pick that class depending on what skills it has towards certain professions. So pre 5.8, another example is the human that of course had blacksmithing and mining, and then of course woodworking and woodcutting, and I believe leatherworking and skinning as well. That may have been the elk. I'm pretty sure the human had it as well. There was 2 sort of races that went that route, that had all of the gathering and crafting professions encompassed into weapon and armor making. So blacksmithing, leatherworking for the armor, and then blacksmithing and woodworking for the weapons. And then you also had the harvesting professions to go with that. So you had statistic increases to mining, to woodcutting, and to skinning to increase your loot yield and just your general overall effectiveness while harvesting. Now with those harvesting nodes gone, and with each race being as good as a harvester as the next one depending on their passive skill training, I feel less pressured to go for the human and sacrifice my stealth ability as the Gwynisian, sort of being more of an open target and less sneaky as the human, for those extra statistic increases. I feel less pressured to do that now that they've gotten rid of that and they've only added 2 sort of professions. Fair enough, I'm not really going to use jewel crafting or woodworking, but as a solo player I would much rather be able to stealth than have a little bit of a statistic increase. Now that's just my opinion, I hope that all makes sense, but yeah, just a quick discussion on being just sort of more free for all. Now what class or race do you pick to gather on craft? Do you have 2 separate classes, or do you just not focus PvP? Do you just prefer to craft and go out and harvest the materials to make weapons, necromancy to make the vessels and whatnot? Because of course each class now only has a few statistic increases to certain professions and has no harvesting statistic increases at all because of the skill training being different. It's sort of down to personal preference, racial abilities. I mean, these base stats do increase statistics around crafting and harvesting, such as node damage, experimentation, but only marginally, only by like 1 or 2% when you cap them out to the full. So that would take a while and it would only be the littlest of increases. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys play as and why, for what reason, more so around the crafting and the gathering. I'm going to spend the next 2 days, as I said, looting up a few things in my spirit bank to get a head start in the next server, try and get to level 16 to unlock these 2 major discipline slots and really start focusing on PvP and testing out different PvP builds. Of course first with the duelist, but then a few other different class and race combinations. It is now a little bit easier and more of a fleshed out game with the new patch, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already grabbed Crowfall. And of course, be sure to subscribe and check back to the channel for more Crowfall content. Check the description down below for links to my Game On and Redbubble stores for gamer gifts of all different types. And yeah, thanks for the support, and I'm about to go grind, so I shall see you in the next video.